Francesa podcast on the Bedroom Network, brought to you by Casamigos Tequila. Casamigos Tequila is brought to you by those who drink it. Football Friday, as we get ready for the Sunday edition of Week 6 in the NFL, which began last night with San Francisco's 36-24 win over Seattle. That's now three straight losses for the Seahawks. Purdy had a good game, three touchdown passes. Seattle's defense has been beat up and it hasn't played well. So the Niners get to 500. Seattle falls to 500. Um, and the Niners will take command, obviously, out there once they get healthier, especially when they get McCaffrey back and get everybody else going. All right, this week, buys for the Chiefs, who are 5-0, the Vikings, who are 5-0, the Dolphins, and the Rams. So you have both 5-0 teams out of it. You have the Chiefs out of it this week. The primetime games will be interesting ones because they are both with the New York teams and they will be pitted against baseball games involving the New York teams. So you have the Giants Sunday night against the Bengals coming off the win against Seattle, and they will be up against the Met game. The Mets will be playing, obviously, against the West Coast team, which will be determined this evening, either San Diego or the Dodgers. And then on Monday night, the Jets, who will garner a lot of attention because of everything that has gone on this week, from the coaching change to the demotion of Hackett to, and we'll have more on the Jets in a minute. Um, they will be up against the Yankees, who will be playing Monday night after the Mets play at 4, game 2 out west. The Yankees will open up at home against either Kansas City or Detroit. That will be settled tomorrow. Now, um, as we said, both New York teams in prime time, so it's a very different Sunday viewing in New York area. And baseball's on everybody's mind because you have not just the Yankees, you have the Mets, both teams in the NLCS and ALCS respectively, and they are each one step away from the World Series. And now we have to bring the idea of a Subway Series back into the equation. And remember, as I have stated many times through the years, and for those of you who have thought about a Subway Series at many times, the 2000 Subway Series was a bitter, bitter disappointment from a lot of standpoints. It did not live up to what we thought it would be. It's something we highly anticipated and expected to produce enormous, enormous attention, enormous buzz, and just an incredible sports outpouring, but it didn't. It didn't. First of all, the Yankees were at the tail end of a dynasty. They did not appreciate that the Mets were there. They had to deal with an owner who could not even fathom the idea that his team could lose to the Mets, which put incredible pressure on the Yankees and made it a very distasteful uh, experience for the Yankees and for their manager, who really hated the whole thing. The Yankees made themselves scarce in terms of media availability, which put a lot of pressure on the Mets, which the Mets resented. It was just a mess. Now, I do believe this time, should it happen, it will have a far different feel and it will be a very different event for a couple of reasons. Number one, because the Yankees haven't been in the World Series in 15 years. When they were there last time, they had won it in 96, 98, and 99. They were trying to win it again in 2000, which they did, but they were living in the World Series. So the World Series was old hat to them, and the Mets were an annoyance. Now it would be Mets would be a challenge, especially the way the Mets played against them in the regular season, and the Mets have this very special season going. They're a far better team than they were in 2000, where they had a lot of limitations, and it would be a highly interesting and I think entertaining series. So I think for a lot of reasons it would be everything we had hoped 2000 was. But again, As putting the cart before the horse. Let's first see who the two teams are going to play, and then we'll worry about whether they can both get to the World Series this year. Now, as far as football, you got a game in London on Sunday morning, Jacksonville against the Bears. Bears playing a little better. Their quarterback's starting to get his feet on the ground. Jacksonville finally got a win last week. They've had a couple of tough losses. They had the brutal loss in Buffalo. This is a big game for Jacksonville. Why? Because their owner takes London games extremely seriously. Their owner is the only one who considers London to be a home game. London is very important to him. And his team, if it doesn't play well in London, will anger him greatly, even though there's already a lot of talk that he's already preparing to make a big run at Belichick at the end of the season. They're 1-4. Bears are 3-2. Watch for Tank Bigsby for Jacksonville to take over a lot of the running chores, even if Etienne is healthy, because they're down on Etienne. So Bigsby has come up the last 2 weeks with some big running performances. Watch him get a lot more carries, and you can run the ball on the Bears. The Cards are 2-3 to take on the 3-2 Packers. Packers are going to get better as the season goes on. They got to settle a couple of their internal issues, and they got to settle a couple of their defensive issues. And their quarterback, now that he's over the injury, will start to get better and better. The Cards are very up and down, hard to figure, but on good weeks they can play. The Colts are 2-3. I think it will be Richardson, but if it's not, it's Flacco, and I think more people would rather see Flacco play. Taylor's hurt with the ankle. They play the Titans, who are not any good, and their quarterback commits way too many mistakes. This is a game the Colts should be able to win. Colts are 2-3, and they could easily be better than that. They've lost some tough games that they were into the final seconds. They lost the first week by 2 points to Houston. They lost to Green Bay by 6, and they were throwing the ball in the end zone at the end of the game. They're 2-3. They could easily be better, and they should get to 500 here. Texans are 4-1. They lose Collins to the IR. May starts for the Pats, which should mean another win for the Texans, who are maybe, along with the Ravens, going to emerge as the biggest threat to the Chiefs down the road. The Browns are 1-4 and headed towards a dismantling. The Eagles are 2-2 and are headed towards a dismantling. Things are not good in either camp, to put it mildly. Not good with the coaches, not good with the quarterbacks, not good with a lot of things. So Eagles are still thinking division title, thinking playoffs, but there's a lot of issues there, and this could easily be the head coach's last season. The Browns are a complete mess, an absolute mess. Washington has been one of the real interesting stories of the early season. Their quarterback has hit the ground running, to say the least. They're 4-1, having won a game against the Giants that they should have lost. Since then, they've played well, and they've played brilliantly offensively. Now they get the Ravens. The Ravens are 3-2 and headed north, and they are probably, I think, still the biggest threat to Kansas City in the AFC. They have injuries, but they have a chance to emerge over the second half of the season as they put things back together, get the offensive line solidified. Remember, they're breaking in a whole new defensive coaching staff. They had to add defensive people who fill in for defensive people who left. Washington is not good defensively. They are excellent offensively. They can move the chains. They can possess the ball. They can play up tempo. They can go down the field with the ball. They can pretty much play any kind of offense you want to play right now. And they're scoring points. This will be a high scoring game, but the problem is the Ravens will score more. Chargers are 2-2. Broncos 3-2. Won 3 straight games. Sean is doing a good job utilizing Knicks. Their defense is playing very well. This game's going to be a field goal late. You can see it coming. Uh, Herbert's going to play. He's banged up. Um, very. This game has 19, 16, 20, 17 written all over it. Pittsburgh's 3-2 off a tough loss last week. Came down to the final play of the game against the Cowboys. Raiders are 2-3. They're going to O'Connell at quarterback, making the change there. They don't have Adams. They're trying to trade him. He's not available this week. Max is banged up. Things are not good in Raiderland. When are they usually? Pittsburgh should get to 4-2. They need their offense to be better and more consistent. And that's why, while you look at what Fields has done, you can see that other quarterback who you may have heard of rearing his head very soon. Fascinating game late. Lions, Cowboys. Now the Cowboys are still banged up. They're not going to have Parsons. They're banged up on the defensive interior. They will be healthier in the secondary. Bland will be back. They don't really have a running game. They can be better offensively. They've had to make some changes offensively. The Lions should be able, especially if their center comes back, what looks like Ragnar might come back here. If he does, that they have the ability behind Gibbs and Montgomery, who are both having good years. Gibbs is averaging 5.3 a carry. He's got 3 touchdowns. Montgomery's averaging 4.3 a carry. He's got 4 touchdowns. They're both used superbly. They have the best offensive line in the sport. And the Cowboys are very vulnerable to the run right now. I think the Lions win. I don't expect them to blow the Cowboys out because the Lions aren't good enough defensively to stop anybody. That's the problem. Their defense has not lived up to what they had hoped it would be. Their offense is good. Their defense is not. The Lions, I think, will win, but I think it'll probably be a close game. The Falcons and the Panthers, this is a big game for the Falcons because the Falcons have to prove that they aren't going to slip up in these kind of games now. They're good. Morris has to be better. He gave away one game. He almost gave away another. He's got to be better in his in-game decisions. The Falcons can move the ball on anybody. They're better defensively. They should win this game. And I think they will eat up Carolina offensively. But they have to prove they can be consistent in these kind of games and not make this a tighter game than it should be. They still have a habit of giving games away, and they have to be careful of that. They're 3-2 here, and they get to 4-2. They have a chance to have a good season. They really do. And remember, now that the Saints are not only sliding, but hurting, that is a big issue. The Saints get the Bucs this week. They're going to start Spencer Rattler at quarterback. Carr usually is extremely dependable physically. He usually shows up and dances all the dances. Problem is he hurt his oblique late in the game. He's out a couple of weeks. They're going to start the South Carolina 5th-round pick, who is not your normal 5th-round quarterback. Rattler's got ability. He'll throw the ball around a lot. He might throw a couple to the wrong team. Saints were great the first couple of weeks and had really opened everybody's eyes, and now they've lost 3 games in a row. Bucs are 3-2, and their quarterback does not get enough appreciation. 11 touchdowns, 2 intercepts. Baker Mayfield's done a good job, and he's become a very effective quarterback in this league, and he deserves the credit. He's got good receivers with Goodwin and Evans, consistent passing game to those 2 guys. They're 3-2. This is an interesting game. It really is. Bucs get this game. They're in pretty good shape. This is a game they need to win, though, against a quarterback playing for the first time. As we said, Sunday night games, Monday night games, New York teams. Giants will get the Bengals on Sunday night. The Bengals, we know they can score on anybody. Burrows has 12 touchdown passes already, 2 picks. Chase is already, everyone talked about how Chase was miserable early in the season. The guy's already got 5 touchdowns. Already got big numbers. They're moving the ball. They just can't stop anybody. Giants will run on them, and the Giant offensive line is playing better, quietly playing better. Now, the Giants are banged up. It sounds like Neighbors is not going to get cleared from concussion protocol. Remember, I don't know yet. It's a Sunday night game for sure, but it sounds like at this time this morning that he will not play. Now, here's the thing I don't understand. And it just shows you how poor teams are now at handling their young stars. He has a concussion. He's already missed one game. He has not passed the fundamental jumps of concussion protocol. What is he doing out at a concert? Now, you and I both know. I don't know what concert he went to. I probably, if you mentioned the people, I probably would never even have heard of them. Okay, that's fine. That's not the point. The point is this: two things at the concussion at the concert. It's loud, and there's a lot of bright lights. Neither is good for healing a concussion. You are trying to get this guy available so that you can win football games. He has already proved his worth of being drafted where he was and that he is on his way to stardom. We all agree on that. But it just shows you how poor these teams are now at handling the behavior of their players. This guy is injured. What is he doing at a concert? You can tell me, his time is his own. This time's not his own when he's got a concussion. What is he doing out? Now, I'm not saying he's partying. I'm not saying he's imbibing in any way. What I'm saying is it's loud, and it's real bright. Neither is good for the concussion protocol you are trying to get past. It doesn't make any sense. But it just shows you time and again, they cannot control these young players. And they cannot get them to dedicate themselves to the game at hand. He should be resting. I don't care what he does with his time normally. That's his business. I hope he's smart about it. But this is just flat out irresponsible and dumb that he's at a concert. I mean, it makes no sense. That sounds like he's not playing. We know that Thibodeau's out. Singletary's out. Obviously, everybody fell in love with the replay. It was the game that was the Giants' replacement game. Okay, because they're underlings. Slayton being one of them, not really an underling, but the point is they stepped up. The running back stepped up. The wide receivers stepped up, and they had a good game against Seattle. They deserved to win that game. Now, this is a game that's going to be dangerous for them because Burrow's going to cut them apart. They're going to have to score a lot of points. They can because Cincinnati can't stop the run. They will not be able to stop the Giant running game. They will not be able to stop Daniel Jones running the ball. They will not be able to stop the downfield passing of the Giants. They haven't stopped anybody. They stink defensively. They're 1-4, and they're a bad club that can score points. They will play pitch and catch with Chase and Higgins. We know that. They have weapons. They have weapons behind those guys. We know they might even get healthier at running back. The point is they are going to score points. Can the Giants keep up with them? We'll see. We'll see. This could be, last one with the ball game. It could be one of those. Sunday night game. Cincinnati's used to the bright lights and the big game. Giants aren't as used to it. Bottom line is, though, this is a winnable game. If the Giants can get this game, the season is taking on a little. Says Seattle was a real uplifting experience for them. No question about it. It was a big win. If they could back it up with another win, this season would take on a far different feel than if they don't. So it's a big game. There's no question. And then we get to the Jets, who have continued to be the saga, and this week the saga took a whole new turn. Now, I've been through this since last week when I called for Salah and Hackett to be dismissed. Hackett is still in the building. I don't know why. That makes no sense. A lot of these moves made no sense. The elevation of the defensive coordinator left them lean in the defensive staff. I understand that Ulbrich is going to keep his defensive coordinator responsibilities. Not easy to do when you're trying to learn how to be a head coach. There's not enough hours in the day. So that means he is abdicating a lot of offensive responsibility to the new offensive coordinator, who is now Todd Downing, who has not had any of this responsibility in the past. Now, has he allowed the other coaches, including Carter, to handle running game still? Or has running game been moved? I don't know the answer to that. Seems to me they are very light now in the defensive room because you lost Salah, who had a good defensive eye and was a good defensive coach. He wasn't a good head coach. He was a very poor head coach. He was a good defensive coordinator. Brick, as they seem to call him, okay, and I don't know him, I've never met him. He's a defensive coordinator who now has been elevated to head coach. He might be a leader of men. I don't know that. He could be. I'm not saying he is or he isn't because I don't know that yet. What I do know is if he's going to maintain his role as defensive coordinator, it's going to be very hard for him to handle all the aspects of being the head coach, which means he is going to have to trust his offensive coaching room. And his offensive coaching room doesn't have enough experience, gravitas, or talent in the room. Woody needed to add an offensive coach who understands the sport and who has been there and done that to help coach that offense. Now, you can tell me, wait a second, Aaron Rodgers can do that himself. Aaron Rodgers will handle the passing game. It's his passing game. I understand that. You're working off his rhythm, his cadence, his personnel, but he is not going to orchestrate the running game. And the running game is putrid. They have got to block for the run and put a running game in that makes sense. Now, from my understanding, they have a bunch of unhappy guys in that room, meaning players, as far as how they're being coached. That should have all been addressed here. Woody, I think clearly since I made the plea to get rid of the head coach and get rid of Hackett, I obviously felt those were good moves, even though I know they're rash moves in season. It's a very hard thing to do. But I don't feel he has covered the process now with enough brain power and enough experience. I would have rather that he brought in an interim head coach, kept the defensive coordinator in place because he's doing a good job. I understand he has aspirations to be a head coach. I have no problem with that. But what he's doing right now, he had no way to become the head coach right now and delegate his responsibility as defensive coordinator. He has kept his responsibility as defensive coordinator, which means he didn't feel there was anybody in the room who could replace him. So now you're down Salah. You have Rick as the defensive coordinator, but he now has to be the head coach, which means the only possible way you can do that is to abdicate a lot of the offensive powers to somebody, and now they're giving it to a new person. While Hackett is still in the room, what is he doing? What is his job now? What is his role now other than being ticked off? And maybe, hanging out with Aaron Rodgers, I know how close they are. Rodgers' influence in the room should not be dismissed in any way, and it should be taken into account. He is an all-world quarterback who is 40 years old. He understands the sport. I would treat him the same way I would treat Tom Brady, the same way I would treat Peyton Manning. But they seem far more buttoned down than he does in terms of how they run things inside the team. His situation seems to always have this flighty nature to it. See, no one questions that the quarterback, especially a quarterback who has the kind of resume that Rodgers has, is the team leader in terms of running the locker room, in terms of being in charge. No one in any way questions that. You welcome that when you bring him in. He has earned that status, but he has to know how to use it properly. If it's not used properly, if it doesn't make the players around them better, if it doesn't lift the way Brady did in Tampa, then it's a negative. And here it has been a negative. Explain to me how they are going to, in this week, get an offensive game plan that we can be comfortable with, and at the same time, get the running game fixed. There's three things here that have to improve dramatically. Number one, run blocking has to improve dramatically. Play calling has to improve dramatically, and they have to get the receivers open, scheme to get their receivers open. Their receivers are never open. You never see Rodgers throwing to wide open receivers like you do on any decent passing team. Watch Atlanta. Cousins will have 10 throws where he's throwing to guys who are 30 yards by themselves. In the Minnesota game, that happens countless times for Sam Darnold. Aaron Rodgers is always trying to fit the ball into a little area, or he's throwing a back shoulder throw to try and get the guy to catch the ball. They are covered like the drapes. It can't work that way. Not with a 40-year-old quarterback who has to get rid of the ball within 2.5 or he's going to hit the ground hard. There is a huge disconnect here between deployment of personnel on offense, play calling, and overall mentality. Having a running game is a mentality. You have to believe you can do it. You want to be able to pound the rock, because if you can pound the rock, if you can make them play to run, all of a sudden Rodgers has got all kinds of things at his disposal, including play action stuff and the ability to have seams and open areas to throw the ball to. That's not there because their running game yields nothing. When they hand the ball off to Hall, he usually gets hit before he gets to the line of scrimmage. and he goes down like a British heavyweight. The bottom line is it can't continue this way. This has to stop. And what I look at is what's going to make me think that Downing, with a unhappy Hackett in the room and nobody added to the room, a head coach who is a defensive coordinator who is maintaining his defensive coordinating responsibilities, where is the input into the offense going to come from that is going to make it better in a very quick amount of time to be presented before the nation on Monday night? That's why I think they needed to bring. Now, you heard all these things that Salah wanted to do. Well, if Salah wanted to do all these things, he should have done them. If he wanted to bring Arthur Smith in here, he should have done it. If he was going to get rid of Hackett before the year started, he should have done it. If he was going to get rid of him 2 weeks ago after the Denver game, he should have done it. All of this should have happened. If it had happened, you would have had a different outcome here. Now, I know Rodgers says, hey, and I laud Rodgers for taking it on his shoulders, saying if I had played better, if we're 4-1, none of this happens. And he's probably right. Because it's a results-driven business. But if they were 4-1, having played the game they played in the Denver game, I would have said the same things I said. If they played the same way against Minnesota and Denver, I would have said the same thing. I would have said they can't run the ball, but they won. They can't get the ball down the field, but they won. They can't keep him upright except in quick passing situations, but they won. They won because the defense played well in both outings. That would have been the answer. I don't know what's going on with Reddick. I obviously have friends at CAA. I haven't bothered to call and ask the Reddick saga of why they were so angered with him. Reddick hasn't handled this well, which is why, I mean, they're a very smart, well-run organization. So I'm sure they had their reasons. Having dealt with them, having had them represent me in different things, I know how qualified they are and how smart they are. So if they did it, they had a reason for doing it. And they're too smart to throw away big money. So he had to really earn that. So I would say to him, salvage your career and your season and get in here and play football. That could only help the Jets. Now, if he doesn't do that, it looks like he has completely ruined his career. So from that standpoint, maybe there's some break in that. Maybe there's some break in Devontae Adams. They don't have to have Adams. You would like to have Adams, though, because he would give them another really. Because let's be honest, we went into this season, and right now we really, and I take full responsibility for being dead wrong about both players, especially Hall. I thought Hall was going to have a big year. I thought he was going to have a big year in the passing game. I thought he was going to have a big year being the dynamic player we have seen in the past. He has been awful, and the running game has been actually so bad it's beyond comprehension. Do I feel all this will change? I feel they made moves. Woody made moves. Whether Rodgers had a hand in it or not, who cares? It really doesn't matter. Hackett's not calling the plays anymore. He shouldn't be in the building, but that's fine. And Salah's gone. Maybe they now will be held accountable. Maybe they'll come out alert. Maybe they won't commit 9,000 terrible penalties. Maybe they'll be held accountable when they commit stupid personal fouls after plays and, get taunting penalties that cost them games and all the stuff that's going on. Saleh wasn't a head coach. That's all there is to it. I apologize for him losing his job in terms of I feel bad for him. I don't like to see anybody lose their job, but he wasn't any good at it. He's a good offensive coordinator. Somebody would hire him in a second to run their defense. He's not a head coach. I don't think he's ever going to be a head coach. There's a lot of coordinators who never become good head coaches. Call it the Bill Arnsparger or the North Turner School of Football. North Turner's a good guy, and he's a really good coach, and he was a wonderful play caller and offensive coordinator. He couldn't be a head coach because he's too nice. And you know what? Most head coaches, if you're too nice, if you don't have a little blank in you, it doesn't work. You got to be let's put it this way, you got to be a little bit of a jerk to be a good head coach because you got to be a pain in the neck to people. If you're not, it's not going to work. You can't just let them have their way. You got to come down on them hard. Even when and sometimes you come down on them hard just for the purpose of coming down on them hard, to send a message and to psychologically tweak them and to motivate them and to motivate your squad. That's your job. Football is a psychological game of getting people ready to play at a fever pitch on a certain day. It's not an everyday sport. It's a once a week sport where you have to bring your team to a crescendo to have them play right. When you don't, you see what happens. So all this will be on display on Monday night. Do I think they have solved the equation? No. Because I think they're light now on the defensive side and light on the offensive side, and that scares me. All right, Mike Francesa podcast at gmail.com. Before I get to the emails, squares. We tell you about the squares all the time. Bet Rivers had the squares first. Now you hear other people advertising the squares. You know what? They stole the idea because it's a good one, from Bet Rivers. Players can play square game parlays on college football and NFL games. They do that. You play same game parlays, and you get a chance to get squares. So make a play. Everyone loves the same game parlays. Play them on college football, play them on NFL, and you get your slots on the big board. 0 to 9, 0 to 9. You might win profit boosts. You might win some bonus bets. You might win $10,000 in bonus money. And it doesn't cost you a cent. It's just more action for you. So play the Squares game, exclusive Square game, offers additional chances for all those prizes. So check it out on college football and on the NFL by placing your same game parlays at betrivers.com or on the BetRivers app. Now, emails, Mike Francesa podcast at gmail.com. Let's see what's on your mind today before we bid you adieu. Now, one thing. We will have podcasts live after the Jet game, after the Giant game, after the Yankee game, after the Met game, as we've been doing. We will do that. And I really thank the production people who have done a great job. We're not going to do anything tomorrow. Be the first time in like 12 days we haven't done anything. Hey, I got the easy part. I turn on the cameras and I go. They got the hard part. They got to wait around. They got to get everything right. They got to get the production up and the sound up and everything done. So kudos to all of them for doing a very good job and putting in a lot of hours. So we thank them for that. And hopefully they're finding it fun and rewarding because it's a fun time of year. Here we go. Daniel starts us off. Given Judge's dreadful postseason numbers, a decent sampling, why not trade him for a slew of prospects in pitching? When you get a player like this, especially in a market where you want to draw 40,000 people per game, you don't get rid of a homegrown player like this guy. Okay, the postseason will eventually come. Now he might not become one of the great. He might not become Reggie Jackson or Mickey Mantle or Big Papi or Babe Ruth or even Giancarlo Stanton in the postseason. But he will have his moments in the postseason. They will come. He might not dominate the way you want him to, the way he has in the regular season, for whatever reason. Some people don't. He might always play beneath what he does in the regular season, which will draw him criticism, especially if the Yankees don't win. But he will have his moments. A-Rod eventually had 2009. Without A-Rod in 2009 and A-Rod's 16 RBIs, which was a record at that time for 1 year, they don't win. Gary, which one of the Ohio football teams is having the more disappointing season, the Browns or the Bengals? We could ponder this one for a while. I'd say the expectations were higher on the Bengals as they still were a team that could contend with a healthy Burrows and a motivated Chase. But I don't think they saw the defensive complete collapse that we have seen from the Bengals, which is now, I think, beyond fixing this season. So I would say the Bengals. Todd, were you surprised to see Francona take the Cincinnati Reds job? I'm never surprised to see people, despite their age, with him, and I think he is a great manager and a great guy and a friend. Love him. I worried about his health being an issue. But what happens is, I think a lot of, if you're really good at something to the point where people are always offering you the ability to go back and do it again. And if you've been fortunate enough to be good at something, that continues to happen. You don't go back if you find things that interest you. If you don't find things that interest you, then you go back. And I would say he probably was bored. That's usually what happens. John Madden told me that. He said, you go back to coach when you don't find something else that, whets your appetite or keeps you interested. If you do, you don't go back. If you don't, you go back. And I think it's the same thing. I think he knows he's great at that. He misses the camaraderie and the day-to-day nature of it. And he was bored probably. I think he'll do a great job because he's a great manager. Phil, would you like to see the NFL implement a weekly Tuesday night game? No, listen, the NFL is on enough nights of the week. They don't need a Tuesday night game. Sean, could you see Bill Belichick and Jerry Jones coexisting? 100%, and you left out the most important ingredient there, which is Stephen Jones. Stephen Jones is the guy who's running the day-to-day operation of the Cowboys. Stephen Jones is highly respected by everybody. Not to say that Jerry isn't respected for being a dynamic business personality, but he's out there in the ozone. You know that when Jerry wants something, he wants it, and it might not always be right. And Jerry likes the limelight a lot. He likes the spotlight a lot. He likes being a star a lot. Stephen doesn't care. Belichick and Stephen Jones have a very strong relationship. The Cowboys are definitely in play. So are other teams, but the Cowboys are definitely in play. And I think Belichick will be back next year. Not that I know anything, because Belichick and I have never spoken. We've never had a relationship. But I think he's definitely going to coach next year. I'd be very surprised if he doesn't. Phil, could the win over the Seahawks spark some momentum for the Giants? Yes, absolutely, for a couple of reasons. One, going out there and getting a win when you're supposed to get beat, and you're a 6.5 point underdog, is a positive. But number two, they got a lot of good performances from unexpected places. And their offensive line showed another step in its maturity and growth. And Daniel Jones continued to do the job, which I think is a big positive. So right now, I think you're seeing them. My feel for them right now is more like 2 years ago than it was last year, which is big. Ernie, do you think Rodgers regrets coming to the Jets? No. I think he loves. I think Rodgers likes all the confusion. I think he. I think it's part of his being. So I would say no. You can ask him that, not me, but I would say no. It was funny that I heard him. They were when I was in the car. They were replaying all the interviews. His being on with McAfee, and um, he said Woody called him to see how he was doing Monday night, but they never discussed anything about the coach. Yeah, sure. Woody was going to fire him Monday night, and he didn't mention it to Rogers on the phone. I mean, hey, listen, some things people can buy. That one's a tough one. Chris, if the Mets win the World Series, which moment of the last 2 weeks will be the most remembered? I gather you're talking about the uh, home runs and the memorable home runs and moments that have happened. There's no question. Hey, no matter what happens from here or what happened along the way, the Alonso home run in Milwaukee will be regarded as one of the biggest postseason home runs in the history of baseball. That series was gone. Milwaukee was a good club, and they were up 2 runs in the ninth inning. That home run, 2 runs down, ninth inning, deciding game, those don't happen. The Alonso home run will be remembered forever. That home run is one for the ages, and nothing will be just like that. Nothing. Remember, the Grand Slam here wasn't an elimination game. Not dismissing the Grand Slammer. Okay, the performance in Atlanta, Game One, they could have still won Game Two, and I think they clearly would have. Neither one of those even comes near what was going on in Milwaukee. That is one for the ages. That one will stand alone for a very, very long time. We'll see you Sunday. Enjoy the next couple of days.